Don't be ridiculous. My dad scoffed across the dining table, his fork stabbing into the steak like a final verdict. You? Running a business? You'll drown before you even start. Asking for $75,000? It's too risky. Better stick to your job and stay small. The words landed like stones in my chest. I had walked into that conversation with trembling hands and a folder full of plans, charts, notes, even a cautious forecast. I thought maybe, for once, he'd look at me and see possibility instead of fragility. But his smirk told me everything. Hi everyone, my name is Clare, I'm 29. And in that moment, as his laughter rang out like a cracked bell, I felt the invisible chains tighten. Have you ever wondered why the people who preach family first are the same ones who teach you your worth is last? I sat there silently, the air heavy with the smell of overcooked meat and disappointment. Mom avoided my eyes. Joseph leaned back smug, already scrolling on his phone. My brother never needed to ask for anything. Dad threw it all his way. And months later, I watched with my own eyes as Dad signed a loan contract not for my idea, but for Joseph's BMW dealership dream. Not $75,000. Not even double. $725,000, nearly 10 times what I had begged for. Now this, he'd said proudly, patting Joseph's back, is a future worth betting on. The irony was cruel. My idea sat in a dusty folder in my desk drawer, while Joseph parked 3 shiny cars in front of the house, each one more expensive than the last. And I worked double shifts just to keep my rent. Then came the cracks. Cars repossessed. Empty showrooms. Dad's booming voice replaced by phone calls from creditors. And Joseph? A ghost in designer shoes. Now, today, my father stands in my living room, eyes bloodshot, voice trembling but proud even in defeat. Claire, he says, as if the years of dismissal never happened, you'll have to sell your house. It's the only way we can save the family. His words hang in the air like smoke from a burning bridge. My chest tightens, but this time, my silence feels different. This time, my silence is fire. And I know, he has no idea what's coming. I stared at him, my own father, standing in my living room as if he owned it. His voice carried entitlement, not apology. Claire, it's just a house. You're single, no kids. You don't need all this space. Family sacrifice means stepping up when we need you most. My jaw clenched. That word, sacrifice, he wielded it like a sword, but only ever pointed at me. Where was sacrifice when I asked for help? Where was family when I worked 2 jobs to cover my bills while Joseph played businessman with his fleet of German cars? I didn't answer right away. Silence stretched, filled only by the ticking of the clock on my wall. My father shifted, uncomfortable, as if my refusal to immediately agree was an act of betrayal. Claire, he pressed, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Joseph's dealership just needs a little breathing room. Breathing room. I almost laughed. They had drained me of oxygen years ago. Inside, my mind replayed the nights I sketched logos, the mornings I woke before dawn to map out supply chains. My online business plan, dismissed as childish, unrealistic, still glowed like an ember. And now, the same man who laughed in my face dared to ask me to burn down the only stability I'd built, just to prop up Joseph's ashes. Finally, I spoke. Dad, when I asked you for $75,000, you said it was too risky. You laughed. You called me naive. But Joseph, he got $725,000 without blinking. And now you want my house to pay for his mistakes. He flinched, his face tightening. But instead of shame, his pride swelled. Joseph is your brother. We don't abandon each other. I stepped closer, my voice low, each word sharp. Funny. You abandoned me the moment I dared to dream. The room fell silent, but something shifted inside me. For the first time, I wasn't begging for approval, I was setting the stage. And I knew, the curtain was only beginning to rise. His face hardened, that familiar stone wall he wore whenever he realized I wasn't bending. You always make things about you, Claire, he snapped. This isn't about the past. It's about survival. You've been living in this house like a queen while your brother fights to rebuild. Don't you think it's time you gave something back? The hypocrisy nearly stole my breath. A queen? I had clawed for every inch of stability, saved for years, skipped vacations, said no to dinners out, while Joseph's fights were champagne parties disguised as networking events. I felt heat rising in my chest, but I kept my voice even. Gave something back? I was never given anything, Dad. You invested in Joseph's fantasy and left me to build myself from scraps. Don't rewrite history now that the fantasy collapsed. His eyes flashed, but behind the anger I caught something else, fear. Not for me. Not for the family. Fear for his reputation. The man who bragged about Joseph's dealership at every barbecue, every holiday, now risked being the fool. And he wanted me to pay for his pride. He tried again, softer this time. Claire, honey, we're drowning. The bank will take everything. If you just sell this place, it'll buy us time. We can fix this together. Together. That word stung. It was never together when I begged for belief. It was never together when Joseph's cars gleamed outside while my car's check engine light blinked like a warning. I shook my head slowly. No, Dad. Not this time. For a moment, he looked like he might collapse. But then his jaw tightened, and his voice dropped. You'll regret this. When Joseph is back on his feet and you're still clinging to your little job, you'll regret turning your back on us. I stood taller, my hands steady. He didn't see it yet, but the ground beneath him was already cracking. The door slammed behind him, leaving the echo of his threat rattling through the walls. My living room felt colder, sharper, as though the air itself carried judgment. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the folder I'd once begged him to open, the one still tucked in my desk drawer, filled with the plans he called childish. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words replayed like a broken record. You'll regret this. You'll regret this. But the more I heard them, the stronger my resolve became. Regret wasn't mine to carry anymore. By morning, news trickled in. Joseph's dealership had shut its doors for good. Employees unpaid. Cars seized. Debts spiraling like a whirlpool. And then the whispers, rumors spreading through town about how recklessly the successful son had managed his empire. I walked to my desk, pulled out the old folder, and opened it with trembling hands. The ink was faded, the numbers outdated, but the dream still pulsed. My online business plan hadn't been wrong, it had simply been buried. And I wasn't going to bury myself with it. For weeks, while my father and Joseph scrambled, I poured every ounce of myself into reviving that plan. I worked nights, skipped every unnecessary expense, and taught myself the tools I once thought I'd need funding to afford. The glow of the laptop became my candlelight. My heartbeat became the clock. Meanwhile, Dad left voicemails dripping with desperation, each one angrier than the last. You're selfish, Claire. Your brother's life is falling apart while you hide behind your little projects. His voice cracked near the end, and I almost felt a pang of pity. Almost. Because what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the project wasn't little anymore. It was growing. Orders were trickling in, slow at first, then faster, like rain before a storm. And as I watched the numbers on my screen climb higher, one truth settled into my bones. They had laughed when I asked for $75,000. But soon, they would see what I built without a single dollar of theirs. The first time I saw $10,000 sitting in my business account, I just stared at the screen in disbelief. My hands trembled, not because of fear this time, but because of possibility. It wasn't just numbers, it was validation. Proof that I hadn't been naive, that my vision hadn't been foolish. Proof that I had been right all along. Days blurred into nights as orders multiplied. The house that Dad wanted me to sell became a warehouse of ambition. Boxes stacked in corners, sticky notes taped to the fridge, my dining table turned into a shipping station. Sleep was scarce, but adrenaline kept me alive. Meanwhile, Dad's calls turned darker. One night, he left a message that made my chest tighten. Claire, the bank froze Joseph's accounts. We're drowning here. You can't just stand by. Family doesn't abandon family. That word again. Family. Always his shield, never mine. But the tides had shifted. For once, neighbors weren't talking about Joseph's flashy dealership. They were whispering about how quickly Claire's little project was taking off. My inbox overflowed with repeat customers, collaborations, even offers I once dreamed about. I didn't need their approval, I had strangers who believed in me. And then it happened. At the grocery store, I ran into Mrs. Foster, one of Dad's longtime friends. She tilted her head and smiled warmly. Claire, your father tells everyone you've got the sharpest business mind in the family. He says he always knew you'd outshine Joseph one day. The lie stunned me. My father, who once laughed in my face, was now rewriting history to save his pride. He hadn't supported me, but now he wanted to bask in the glow of my success. I smiled politely, but inside, the fire burned hotter. He didn't know it yet, but I was preparing something. Something that would expose the truth, not through shouting or revenge, but through undeniable reality. Because poetic justice wasn't about tearing them down. It was about standing so tall that their shadows shrank into dust. By the time my business crossed its first $100,000 in profit, I felt like I was living two lives. By day, I quietly packed orders, answered emails, and signed contracts. By night, I listened to Dad's desperate voicemails, each one a mixture of guilt, demand, and veiled insults. Claire, the bank is threatening foreclosure. Do you want your own parents out on the street? His tone dripped with accusation, but I noticed something new, fear. The man who once thundered with certainty now sounded small. Joseph wasn't much better. He showed up unannounced one evening, wearing a suit that looked borrowed, his arrogance dimmed but not gone. You've got money now, he said flatly, eyeing the boxes in my hallway. Dad says you should step up. $100,000 isn't much to you, but it could save everything for us. I laughed, not out of cruelty but disbelief. You think this came easy? Every dollar here is mine. Earned. Not handed to me in a loan contract signed with Dad's blind faith. Joseph's jaw tightened. We're family, Claire. Don't forget that. I leaned closer, my voice steady. I never forgot. You did. When you had cars lined up like trophies, you forgot. When Dad dismissed me, you forgot. Now you want me to bleed for your mistakes? No. He left angry, slamming the door, but I wasn't shaken. Because for the first time, I wasn't the one standing on shaky ground, they were. And then came the invitation. A family dinner at my parents' house, carefully worded as a chance to talk. I knew what it really was, one last attempt to corner me. I accepted anyway. Not to bend, not to surrender, but to let the truth breathe in the same room where I'd once been silenced. The stage was set. And I was ready. The moment I stepped into my parents' dining room, déjà vu hit me like a storm. The same table where Dad once laughed at my $75,000 request was now dressed with cheap wine and forced smiles. Joseph sat stiffly in a corner, eyes hollow, pride chipped away. Mom busied herself with plates, her silence as heavy as always. Dad rose, his voice rehearsed. Claire, we've made mistakes. But we're still a family. We need unity now more than ever. His eyes locked on me, pleading yet expectant, as though my success was his last lifeline. I sat down slowly, feeling every beat of my heart echo through the room. Unity. I repeated. When I begged for a chance, I was mocked. When Joseph gambled with nearly $1 million, he was applauded. And now you want unity, because you're losing. Joseph slammed his fist on the table. This isn't about the past, Claire. It's about saving what's left. I turned to him, calm but sharp. What's left is mine. My business, my home, my peace. You don't get to demand a share of something you never believed in. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Dad tried again, softer this time. People are talking, Claire. They know you're doing well. If you don't help, the shame. I cut him off. The shame was yours when you chose pride over fairness. The shame was yours when you gambled everything on Joseph's dreams and called mine foolish. Don't try to place it on me now. For the first time, no one spoke back. Their faces were masks of disbelief, as if the daughter they had underestimated had finally grown teeth. I stood, pushing my chair back with deliberate calm. This is the last time we have this conversation. I'm not your safety net. Not anymore. And as I walked out, I felt the air shift, the chains I once carried falling silent behind me. The days after that dinner were eerily quiet. No more late-night calls, no sudden knocks at my door. My phone, once buzzing with guilt-laced demands, sat still on the counter. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts without their noise pressing in. Business kept growing. What started as a fragile dream had become a roaring current, carrying me further than I imagined. Partnerships, expansion, even strangers writing to say how much my product mattered to them. It was everything I once begged my family to believe in. And then, a letter arrived. Not handwritten, not personal, formal. A notice that my parents' house was being repossessed. I held it in my hands, the weight of their choices inked across every line. I didn't gloat. I didn't laugh. I simply folded the letter and set it aside. Because their collapse wasn't my revenge, it was the echo of their own decisions. Weeks later, I saw them again, by accident, at the grocery store. Dad's shoulders were slumped, Joseph trailing behind him, both of them shadows of the people who once sneered at me. Dad glanced my way, opened his mouth, then closed it. No words. No demands. Just silence. And in that silence, I found my justice. Poetic justice wasn't selling my house or saving theirs. It was standing tall in the life I built, while theirs crumbled on the foundation of arrogance. That night, I sat at my desk, the same one where my dusty folder once waited, and lit a single candle. I thought of the girl who once begged for belief, the one who swallowed tears while her dreams were laughed at. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who had proved, without their money, without their faith, that she was more than enough. I whispered to the silence, not for them but for myself, I don't need saving. I never did. And with that, the story ended where it should have begun, on my terms.